The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, had been waiting for Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi to soften her stance publicly, but once again, their expectations fell through. Takaichi pointed out that when determining a survival-threatening situation, the category of countries with close relations with Japan, aside from the United States, leaves very few that would qualify. This remark was briefly misinterpreted as her changing position, but in fact, she did not. When asked to retract her statement that a Taiwan contingency could constitute a survival-threatening situation, Takaichi firmly refused, stating that this has always been the consistent position of the Japanese government. At the same time, Japan plans to deploy radar units on the remote islands of Okinawa to monitor the movements of the CCP's military. Amid rising tensions between China and Japan, the two countries also confronted each other at the United Nations, where the CCP gained no advantage. Japan's permanent representative to the UN, Yamazaki Kazuyuki, rebutted Beijing's claim that Japan is experiencing a revival of militarism, stressing that since World War II, Japan has consistently chosen the path of a peaceful nation. In former U.S. President Donald Trump's latest national security strategy, many focused on the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, believing Trump is shifting strategic focus toward the Western Hemisphere, emphasizing America first and regional affairs. But in reality, surrounding and containing the CCP is the centerpiece of Trump's strategic framework, and Taiwan occupies a critical strategic position. Taiwan is the top priority in Trump's geopolitical vision. Recently, Trump signed the Stop Fentanyl Act, for the first time categorizing fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, effectively declaring war on the drug to protect American families. This move is a direct warning to the CCP. Don't miss the next drop. Subscribe and hit the bell. Takaichi refuses to retract Taiwan contingency remarks. On December 16th, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi attended a meeting of the House of Councilors Budget Committee, stating that in determining whether Japan can exercise collective self-defense under a survival-threatening situation, few countries besides the United States could qualify as countries with close relations with Japan. Hirota Hajime, independent, representing the Constitutional Democratic Party caucus, demanded that Takaichi retract her previous parliamentary remark that a Taiwan contingency might constitute a survival-threatening situation. Takaichi reiterated, "What situations qualify will be assessed comprehensively based on events that actually occur. The government's position is consistent and will not be withdrawn." She added that during the November 7th Budget Committee session, where she responded to questions about scenarios involving a Taiwan contingency, her remarks were interpreted by some as exceeding existing government policy. She said she had already reflected on this misunderstanding and stated on November 11th that she would exercise greater caution in future parliamentary responses. A survival-threatening situation refers to a scenario in which an armed attack on a country closely related to Japan is judged to threaten Japan's survival and pose an obvious danger that the Japanese people's rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness may be fundamentally overturned. Under such circumstances, Japan may invoke the use of force under collective self-defense. This system originates from the 2015 security legislation. Japan to deploy radar units on Okinawa Islands to strengthen monitoring of CCP military. While Takaichi was making key remarks on the criteria for determining a survival-threatening situation, Japan's Ministry of Defense was also accelerating efforts to strengthen surveillance of CCP military activity in the southwestern islands. According to Kyodo News, on December 15th, the Okinawa Defense Bureau signed a land lease agreement with Kita-Dato Village in Okinawa Prefecture, planning to deploy a mobile early warning and control radar unit from the Air Self-Defense Force. This unit will monitor PLA aircraft carriers and warplanes entering the Pacific through the waters between Okinawa's main island and Miyako Island. The leased village-owned land will host facilities for the unit and radar installation, with about 30 personnel stationed there. Village Mayor Onizuka Mitsunori had already expressed formal approval for the deployment in July 2024. Construction work is scheduled to begin after New Year's Day 2026. Kita-Dato Island lies approximately 310 kilometers east of Okinawa's main island. In recent years, the CCP military has become more active across the Pacific. On December 6th, jet fighters from the aircraft carrier Liaoning flew through the waters between Okinawa and Miyako and targeted Japanese aircraft with radar lock-on, escalating tensions. Japan sees the island chain in the Pacific as a surveillance gap and is accelerating its intelligence-gathering capabilities. Onizuka said in an interview, "Given the backdrop of joint military exercises by China and Russia in the Pacific, this deployment will contribute to deterrence." Japan to require mandatory disclosure of nationality for property registration starting next year. Alongside strengthening island defense, Japan is also implementing measures within its domestic territory. To better understand the extent of foreign ownership of Japanese real estate, the government plans to require mandatory nationality disclosure in property transfer registration documents beginning next year. According to ANN and NHK, on December 16, Minister of Justice Hiroshi announced that the government is studying the addition of a nationality field to registration documents, which will be verified using passports or other identification. Regardless of purpose, any foreign resident acquiring Japanese property must declare their nationality. Forest land acquisitions will also require nationality reporting for individuals or corporate representatives. The information will be kept internally and not made public. Public comments will be solicited before implementation next fiscal year. Hiraguchi said, "From the standpoint of appropriate land use and management, relevant ministries must cooperate to grasp the actual situation of foreign ownership. This measure will also help confirm inheritance relationships smoothly." Minister for Economic Security, Onoda Kimi, stated that the government will continue reviewing how to appropriately publicize such information to alleviate public concerns about foreign purchases. The government announced that in areas deemed important to national security, foreign individuals or corporations acquired land or buildings in 3,498 cases last fiscal year, 3.1% of all acquisitions. Of these, 1,674 cases involved Chinese buyers, 414 from Taiwan, 378 from South Korea, 211 from the United States. No cases were found where such acquisitions impair the functioning of critical facilities. The Cabinet Office added that most foreign purchases were condominiums or apartment units. In the Tokyo metropolitan area in particular, investment purchases, especially by Chinese buyers, have drawn attention. China and Japan clash at the United Nations. As tensions between China and Japan intensified, the two nations also clashed verbally at the UN. According to Kyodo News, during a December 15 UN Security Council meeting on International Peace and Comprehensive Security, CCP Ambassador Fu Tsong criticized Takaichi's remarks about a Taiwan contingency as against the current of history and demanded their withdrawal. Japonais ambassadeur Yamazaki responded, "These statements are completely unfounded and regrettable." He added that China's remarks deepened division among member states and hindered constructive discussion about the UN's future. Yamazaki also stated, "It is entirely incorrect for China to suggest that Japan would exercise self-defense rights absent an actual armed attack. These misunderstandings should be promptly addressed." On December 16th, Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary Kihara Minoru said Japan had issued an appropriate rebuttal and emphasized that Tokyo has consistently responded firmly to CCP claims inconsistent with fact. Kihara stressed the importance of ensuring that other nations understand Japan's policies accurately and said Japan would continue to communicate its position to the global community calmly and resolutely. Could continued deterioration lead to military conflict? According to Taiwan's Central Broadcasting System on December 16th, Takaichi's Taiwan contingency remarks struck a nerve within the CCP. Beijing responded by freezing cultural exchanges, imposing restrictions on tourism, increasing Coast Guard activity near the Senkaku Islands, Diaoyu, targeting Japanese aircraft with radar lock-on, and conducting joint flights with Russian aircraft. Relations between China and Japan have become extremely fragile. National Chengchi University professor Liu Dihai observed that China's escalating pressure, from law enforcement activities to unilateral military actions, to joint exercises with Russia, could make military friction increasingly likely, especially around the Senkaku/Diaoyu Islands. NCCU researcher Tang Xiaoqing believes friction between China and Japan is inevitable, but the likelihood of full-scale war remains low. The atmosphere has not reached that stage. Although both sides are angry and trading accusations, this anger has not reached the point of full confrontation. Small-scale military clashes may become more likely, but large-scale conflict or an outbreak of full war remains unlikely. Trump's new national security strategy, Taiwan as a top priority. The Trump administration's new national security strategy, NSS, continues to draw attention. The 33-page report places the Western Hemisphere as the top priority of U.S. foreign policy. It introduces the Trump corollary as an extension of the Monroe Doctrine. Recent U.S. diplomacy, including Secretary of State Rubio's visits to several Latin American nations, signals Washington's intent to reassert economic and strategic influence in the region. Although the document does not emphasize military aspects, recent U.S. airstrikes against suspected drug traffickers in the Caribbean and the deployment of U.S. warships and thousands of troops near Venezuela demonstrate the use of military deterrence. Trump's pivot toward the Western Hemisphere does not diminish his focus on the Indo-Pacific or on Taiwan. According to Taiwan Presidential Office Advisor Lin Yimin, Taiwan remains a central priority in Trump's worldview. Lin observed that while Trump's first-term strategy report was 68 pages long and mentioned Taiwan 3 times, the new strategy, just half the length, mentions Taiwan 8 times, reflecting its elevated importance. Trump has reordered regional priorities. First term, Indo-Pacific first, then Europe. Second term, Western Hemisphere first, Asia second, Europe third. The Western Hemisphere includes all of the Americas and both the Atlantic and Pacific, meaning securing the Pacific as a quasi-internal sea is essential for U.S. security. To achieve this, the U.S. must hold the first island chain, and Taiwan is the key. Lin explained that Obama emphasized the Asia-Pacific, Trump's first term expanded it into the Indo-Pacific, and now Trump's second term includes Central Asia to form a complete encirclement of the CCP. Although the NSS does not name China directly, every reference to foreign threats clearly points to Beijing. At the center of this encirclement strategy is Taiwan. Combined with semiconductor strategy, Taiwan is now the critical node in global geopolitics. Lin argued that many mistakenly compare Taiwan to Ukraine. But Ukraine belongs to Europe, a region ranked lower in U.S. strategic priority than Asia or the Indo-Pacific during both of Trump's terms. The U.S. is likely to reallocate resources away from Europe toward the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan is the vital priority. However, Taiwan cannot become complacent. Trump has made clear that to deter the CCP, the U.S. seeks overwhelming collective strength, not unilateral U.S. burden sharing. Allies must invest. After Takaichi asserted, a Taiwan contingency is a Japan contingency, the CCP conducted a series of provocative actions, radar lock-ons, joint flights with Russia, and harassment, prompting the U.S. to send B-52 bombers for joint drills with Japan. The strategic linkage is clear. A Taiwan contingency is a Japan contingency, and a Japan contingency is a U.S. contingency. The new NSS confirms this again. Historic move, Trump designates fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. On December 15th, former President Trump signed an executive order officially designating fentanyl, a synthetic opioid, as a weapon of mass destruction, WMD, expanding military and intelligence authority to target drug traffickers. Fentanyl is responsible for tens of thousands of overdose deaths annually in the U.S. Classifying it as a WMD elevates it from a public health crisis to a national security threat equivalent to chemical warfare. Reuters reported that this designation increases military involvement, allows the Pentagon to assist law enforcement, and authorizes intelligence methods normally used against weapons proliferation. At a White House event honoring Border Patrol officers, Trump said, "We are officially classifying fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction. It is essentially a weapon of mass killing. These cartels aim to flood America with poison and destroy our country." Trump's order states, "Illegal fentanyl is less like a drug and more like a chemical weapon." Earlier this year, Trump designated several drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, opening the door to military operations. Since early September, the U.S. has conducted more than 20 strikes on suspected drug-running vessels in the Caribbean and Pacific. The CCP's role in America's fentanyl crisis. 4 years, China has been the primary source of illegal fentanyl and related substances entering the United States. U.S. Army War College professor R. Evan Ellis has identified Wuhan, Hubei, as a major supply hub due to its strong pharmaceutical and chemical industries. The U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network released a report in April titled, "Illicit Finance Related to Fentanyl, 2024 Threat Patterns and Trends," showing that Mexico and China are the main countries involved in manufacturing fentanyl and laundering the proceeds. Behind these networks, the CCP plays the central role. On December 16th, ex-user Katyusha Farm No. 2 at Runruss 2025 wrote, "The CCP has long been quietly killing through fentanyl without declaring war. America's new classification exposes the CCP and its long-term accomplices. When mass killing becomes industrialized and systemically produced, if this is not war, what is?"